Well, hello everyone, good morning. Welcome back to Techorama TV for day 2. I'm your host for this morning for 1 hour of talk about DevOps. And with me are 3 esteemed friends and well-known people in the community, Brian Randell, Johanning, and Arjan van Beckham. But maybe you can introduce yourself and tell what your connection to DevOps is.
Okay, hello everybody, good morning, good evening, good day. My name is Brian Randell. I am a consultant. I've been in the industry for multiple decades, we'll just leave it at that. And I've been involved in DevOps since before it was called DevOps, primarily focused on the Microsoft world, so what is now Azure DevOps. I was a former MVP for 18 years. I recently spent about 4 years at GitHub, working in developer relations and trying to get them to make the product better. And I also kind of like to talk about DevOps, and I co-wrote a book with my friend Ian Griffiths. And you can go to essentialdevOps.org, where we're going to put the book up for free in digital form, as well as I'm giving away physical copies here at the show. So thanks for having me, and I always love to talk about DevOps.
Great. Josh, what about you?
Hey everyone, name's Josh Johanning. I'm DevOps architect at GitHub. I'm on a fast track team to work with customers on just becoming more DevOps-y, really anything in GitHub. Come from a consulting background where we did DevOps consulting at a firm called 10th Magnitude. So yeah, we get, like Brian, a lot of Microsoft space, Azure DevOps into the GitHub space now. So it's really exciting to kind of be in the cutting edge.
Arjan?
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah.
So my name is Arjan van Beckham. I work as a consultant for Xebia. I do a lot of cloud platform deployments, and of course, cloud needs to change the way of working. So more DevOps, more independent releases. Been doing that for 5-6 years now in a row, and I love doing it. So.
All right, so what I notice when you start talking with people about DevOps, that everybody has their own version of it, what it means, what it does. Sometimes it's, I'm a DevOps engineer, I build pipelines. Sometimes it's very much about the mindset and how a company operates. So Brian, what is your take on DevOps? What in the core, in the essence, what does that entail?
So for me, and this was critical when we wrote the book is about concepts. It's not about a product. So that's the first thing. DevOps is not something you buy in a box. It is an organizational transformation. It is a cultural thing. It's built on a lot of established, successful practices in the industry that we've learned. Some from Agile. Some are more tactical, like CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, the notions of continuous delivery. We pick things from there. So to me, DevOps is people, process, and products. So I definitely buy into a definition that Donovan Brown at Microsoft was well known for promoting when he talked about rubbing DevOps on things. And that is, it's about how you deliver value, right? How you create this essence for your organization and your customers to make them better. Your success makes their success, which then rolls back to you. And so the idea is, how do we have this continuous process of improvement? And so that's what it's about. So to me, it's a lifestyle. It is not you try it, it's once and done. And it's, a big thing you hear, people say, well, DevOps is dead, we're moving on to something else. Our industry is constantly trying to reinvent itself, and honestly, that comes a lot from the business side and the marketing folks who want to make more money. So for example, you may have heard about platform engineering. Does platform engineering mean you don't do DevOps? No. In fact, what you find is that platform engineering is an evolution of the things we learned about doing cloud deployments, and the fact that while we want everybody to, if you build it, you ship it, you run it, right? Not everybody has the bandwidth to do everything. So sometimes, hey, you're deploying to Azure. Azure's this big monster. Not everybody on your team can be an Azure expert as well as be an expert in all those other things. So yes, platform engineering, this idea that we're going to codify how we do certain things in the Azure cloud, that's a great thing. But it's still built upon DevOps patterns. And I think that's the big thing, is people get too wrapped up, and Microsoft's guilty of it. They created a product called Azure DevOps. Right? So people thought, if I use that, I'm doing DevOps. No. And probably the last thing that I'll come on that you said is, nothing drives me crazy more, and it's in the book as well, which is, I'm a DevOps engineer. What does that mean? No. Or we have a DevOps team. If you have a DevOps team, you've really missed the boat. That is not the way it should be. Everybody should be in tune with the principles. Yes, it doesn't mean everybody knows how to write YAML and create a CI/CD pipeline. But what it does mean is people understand the concepts of, before I commit code, I've done everything to make it high quality code. However you do that, whether it's with AI, whether it's with unit testing, whatever. Everybody understands the flow of code, how it moves from idea to production. So I'll summarize with very simply, it is a lifestyle. It is a thing that you bring to the entire organization culturally if you want to be successful.
All right, thanks. And Josh, you work at GitHub, you engage with customers, large enterprises, maybe also some smaller organizations. So what can you add, and from your experience engaging with those companies and peoples?
Yeah, it's working in our team, we do see a lot of different customers, like in all different areas and all different spectrums of the DevOps, the slider scale here. We run into teams that, like Brian was mentioning, we have a DevOps team. They do all the pipelines or all the workflows and that kind of thing. And like Brian mentioned, it's not a team. It's a lifestyle. The best examples and the more like high functioning teams that we see are the teams that have the end to end. They do everything end to end, like inside their own team. So they don't hand off the testing to another team. They don't hand off the pipeline creation to another team. Sure, there might be some other external teams that influence what they do. Security is a big thing. But they have the ownership to be able to change everything with their application and their processes, their automation from end to end, and really own it. Those are the most successful teams that we see. But really, you always do grimace when you hear of we have a DevOps team, and we're using GitHub, we're using Azure DevOps, so we don't need help with the DevOps processes anymore. We're good. It's like check the box, right? So we see some of that, and it kind of just makes me grimace. But
okay, yeah. Arjan, you're as a consultant also engaging with lots of various companies, but also more on the platform engineering side, which Brian already mentioned. The shift of towards platform engineering. How do you see your definition of DevOps, maybe even combined with what the relation to platform engineering is?
Yeah, so I think they go hand in hand, right? Cloud environments are complicated. So in order to set up an Azure environment, you need to know networking, you need to know DNS, you need to know all kinds of stuff, which is typically not what developers know. So providing them with all the essentials to do their job and deliver business value, and they can still do DevOps, right? They can build features and deploy their software in an independent way without worrying about the underlying hardware and infrastructure. I think so. Platform engineering is one part. They manage the platform. The other part is the teams doing DevOps is still really valid.
Well, and you said the magic thing. It's always DNS.
Yes, or firewalls. Yes.
So platform engineering, Azure is complex. We've got a lot of tools from Azure DevOps to GitHub to various other offerings that are out there. So there's so much to learn and to know before you can be, end-to-end responsible for things. How are teams dealing with that? Because is it just so complicated that it becomes hard to do anything at all, or are people managing, and how do they do that?
All right, so I think if you have a platform team, they should give the team enough tools to make it work, right? So they provide infrastructure, they provide networking, all that works, and then the only thing you need to do is deploy your application, whether that be a container app or Kubernetes or whatever you want to do. So that part is part of the team, and that makes it less complicated because you provide all the guardrails and stuff to manage it. But still, working in a DevOps way is really hard, right? So you need to also break down silos, because this is the infra guy, this is the guy that writes the code. No, everybody is end-to-end responsible. So you don't have a DevOps team, you have a team that deploys features. I think that will be a first step, not calling it a DevOps team anymore.
I was gonna say I totally agree. Like we see a lot of like examples of that where like you might have a platform team that owns a platform and that's perfect, but the actual feature team or the application team is the one that's actually building the code, deploying the code. They have all the tools they need to be successful in actually delivering value for the business. It's just you don't call them a DevOps team, or there's not a DevOps team. It's just again more of they have the tools that are provided and built, and then away they go.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues is there's information overload. But you have to put a commitment that you're going to understand the concepts. So first of all, understand what the concepts mean. Then the next step is have an understanding of how what you do ends up in the hands of customers, right? You don't have to be able to sit down, for example, and build the CI/CD pipeline, but you should understand conceptually what happens and how that gets there. You don't have to understand how DNS is configured, but you do have to understand that when you're building an application, that you don't do silly things like, well, I'm going to hard code the name of the server into a bit of my code, right? So it's learning how the environment works and then specializing and being an expert at part of it, right? There are very few people that can know it all, right? Even in this group here, I'm sure the three of us, and including you, because, rumor has it you've done some real work as well, we all could bring value and help each other, right? Yet we're all, we think we're experts because we've done this for a while. What that means is we banged our head a lot and we've learned how to cover the bruises. When you're looking at such a big problem, it's this, take the onion approach, a layer at a time. Look at the largest problem domain, and then drill down. And as you get more layers down, you're going to have to not be able to eat the whole onion. You're going to just go through in sections. So find an area that you have passion for, and find an area that resonates with your brain, right? Not everybody's good at infrastructure, for example. So there's nothing wrong with having specialists that do that, specialists that do the database. But you all have to agree upon the concepts and that goal, right? What is your goal? Delivering value to your customers. When you're focused on that, it's not as scary. It's this thing, though, that people freak out about. Because I can't know it all, I'm not going to do any of it. I'm just going to go back to what's easy. And that's probably the hardest thing. Don't give up on learning. Be a continuous learner. Look to that continuous improvement to make things better.
All right, so a lot of things to learn, and it feels like there's a recent reset where everybody was on a plane or leveled again on the playing field when it came to AI. Lots of new things. We were very accustomed to shipping software, pieces of code that we compile, test, and then put out into production, and then do feedback loops. But now with AI, all of a sudden we have to learn again, how do you do that for AI solutions? So what are your ideas on how DevOps principles and habits, how they apply to AI-based solutions?
Well, I think the first thing, there's two things. Let's break down AI solutions. You can be building things with AI into your application, or you can use AI as a tool to build things. So I'm going to separate the two there. Let's start on the DevOps side of, I want to do agentic DevOps. I want to bring AI to my team, right? In fact, yesterday at GitHub Universe, GitHub announced a bunch of new ways of doing agents as part of the process. So a common thing that people are looking to do is to use AI to remove the drudgery, okay? And the great thing about that is it fits right into the concepts of DevOps, because what it means is it's this notion of we're going to try and move fast, but we're going to do it safely. We talk about, you go to Germany, you can drive really fast on the Autobahn. Well, why is that possible? Well, first of all, they work really hard to maintain the road, right? So the infrastructure is taken care of. It's modern, right? They take care of it. But then when you go fast in the car, you're not allowed to drive a crappy car, right? There's rules about the vehicle. And to go at speed, you have to go safely and responsibly. So when you add AI, who's going to be the responsible person? The AI or the adult in the room, the humans? Well, what it does then is it provides the opportunity for you as humans to be a part of that process even more, to use AI to take care of the drudgery, and you can then in turn add your value by understanding the business need, the concepts, and making sure as things move through it, it meets the needs and is delivering that value, right? So to me, AI is not replacing us. It's actually just changing what we focus on, as well as we are the creative people. Because the key to these successes of these agents, for example, that they show you is that you give it a great definition of work. So one is your writing skills become important. Number two, you hand it off. Well, it fits into the exact pipelines we've been telling people to use for years. If you use GitHub as a platform, you're using GitHub Actions. Well, what does it do? The agent runs through the Actions infrastructure. So all of a sudden, this thing we've been telling you to do for years is even more important. So I think AI just actually puts us on that same track and just says, okay, those things that you had to do, like, oh, I got to build a new pipeline. It looks like this one, but I have to do this. Yeah, the agent can do that. You validate and test it. You still have to have the concepts down, but it's going to reduce the friction so you can move on to those bigger problems.
I think, yeah, like Brian mentioned, I think AI is critically important in today's day and age, but it amplifies the importance of DevOps, like principles in general. Like you can have the best AI in the world, but you're only going to move as fast as the rest of your processes are, both technical and your business processes, your planning, review, testing, those kind of validations. So you really can't move fast. You really can't move fast unless you have the entire, the DevOps, principles kind of all ironed out for your team. Security scanning, validations, all of that. So back to Brian's Autobahn analogy, you could have like the fastest car in the world, but if you have bad tires, that's gonna be the limiting factor in the entire process. So we hear all the time from customers that says, yeah, we rolled out Copilot and our developers love it, but we're not really moving faster, but we're just happier and we're just delivering different things. We do often find in large enterprises there's still something that's the limiting factor, essentially, the lowest common denominator. You're still kind of bound by that. So whether that's just, again, the planning process, your sprints, however you define work, or however you get work approved, budgeting, all that still needs to be taken into account in the whole DevOps cycle and bringing AI into the works.
Yeah, and to add to that, if you put it in your application, it's going to be another feature, right? So you need to manage it. So if you do custom models or whatever, you need to manage it. It needs to be managed the same way as all the other features.
Yeah, and that's, that was that second part of you want to have AI. First of all, if you're getting into building AI solutions, you want to bring AI in, you want to use models and all those things. The first thing you're going to learn is that AI is a data problem, right? It is, how are you going to do that? And that's actually one of the areas that as an industry, we haven't been as good at. Right, I've been working with people like Redgate for years, talking about database DevOps and what that means, and coming to more from the relational database standpoint. But when you think about the way these AI models work, right, it's all about the data they're trained on. And then what we do is we often want to bring our own data and do patterns like RAG. You've heard those terms like that. And so you really start realizing that all the things we talk about in DevOps, this notion of pipelines, this notion of checkpoints, validation, automated testing, those type of things, they fit into the same world, right? The notion of a chat bot, for example, that's just really a different type of interface on top of your application. So it has to be managed exactly the same way. You have to do all the things we've been doing in DevOps. It's just now there's this extra component to it. And we also have to bring that rigor, that professional engineering bias to these applications. This notion of vibe coding is great as a way to explore and learn. But sure, you can vibe code, but can you vibe deploy? Can you vibe debug? No, right? So all the things we've learned and know about good engineering practices, I think, are magnified in this world today.
So latching on to that, making sure you build the applications the right way. There's GitHub Spec Kit that's being worked on now. Josh, maybe you can, or Brian.
You can go ahead. You go first? Okay. So, this goes back to this notion of, Copilot Agent, we'll just pick on that one, and there's other things, Claude does it, Codex. The idea is that you provide some kind of specification, some declaration of a feature you want. So if you're doing Scrum, it's a product backlog item, right? If you're doing just Agile user story. But you provide that as a definition of what you want built. Okay. Well, then going a step further, some of the folks is both at Microsoft and GitHub. In fact, the guys that did it are really involved in MCP servers. Are like, how do we get the AI to be smarter? How do we do it? Well, it's by asking the right questions. So we're almost going back to some of the 80s and 90s stuff of the business analyst, right? We're actually codifying that within a toolkit as a way to make the AI, I don't want to say smarter, but dare I say more reliable. In other words, build the software this way, right? We have this notion, for example, of agent markdown files where you give it guidance on things. So ultimately, with the spec toolkit is they're looking to codify the workflow, just like we learned how to do good CI/CD, right? If you look back to the beginnings of CI/CD, there were some good ideas, there's some bad ideas, right? We learned what to do, right? We learned that sometimes scripts were better because we could version control them, right? There's things we learned on how to do that, as opposed to, say, opaque XML documents that are, pages long, right? We won't name a product there, but, there are certain ways that were good and there's certain ways that are bad. And what we're learning when it's how we interact with the agents, this notion of the spec toolkit, is a way of, hey, these are things we learned that gets the agent to work well, and here's how we can let the humans communicate in their brain format. Because one of the problems is computers speak their own language and we speak ours, and we use things like programming languages as a bridge. And the spec toolkit's about letting not even just the nerds, but not the super nerds, but the business people can work closely and describe what they want, and by being guided by this functional toolkit and then fitting it into the automation, you can again move faster and hopefully get that delivery out the door because it fits into this process of automation.
I mean, in the the new agentic era that we're essentially in, it's a matter of like kind of Brandon mentioned, giving the agent the instructions on how to work. And the agent, the idea there is that it's taking and picking up the work and kind of delivering it from start to finish. So it's not just you as a human running with AI and asking a question and changing a function. The agent is, hey, you're delegating this entire task to the agent. They're going to add the new functionality. They're going to add the tests. If something else needs to be changed, it's going to do that as well. So just providing enough context to the agents and enough information and guidance that when the agent is running, to actually deliver it to what your definition of done is and what good looks like essentially. Versus without the information, you assign an agent the same task let's say twice, it's going to give you a different result each time. So it's just about being more consistent with the results and kind of tailoring that to your team and kind of how you work as a company.
I think it's still about solving the problem, right? Solving the business problem, providing the correct instructions for the agent is basically what you already did as a programmer, right? Because you solved the problem, but now you have an assistant writing the code for you. I think that's the way to look at it.
All right, so I've seen places where a platform engineering team uses the prompts, the instructions, the guided AI to bring autonomy to DevOps teams for the platform part. So they wrote these entire instructions to guide the GitHub Copilot so it can do the work for them, and it just have to answer some questions. So they go through the steps, what type of VNet do you want, so DNS entries, whatever, other things, and that makes them very efficient at doing the stuff that they might not be able to do because they can't know it all, right? Like you said, Brian. So that brings me to the analogy of driving fast at the German highways, which is okay if you have a good car, a good infrastructure, but you still need guardrails, right? So you can just, if there's a corner and you don't take it, it still ends bad. So with that analogy, what do you see as important guardrails that teams should work with to make sure that they can go fast, they can be assisted, but we don't crash into something?
Well, I think there's a couple things that come to mind. One of the first thing is test, and more testing. Again, you hear this term vibe coding, and what goes with it is the phrase YOLO. And if you hang out on the internet in certain subreddits, and you'll see particularly people that don't have any formal engineering, and I'm all for everybody being able to build whatever they want. I think that's great. At the same time, I would like anybody who wants to be a doctor to be a doctor. But I'm not necessarily going to trust you if you haven't been doing this for a while and had the training. And so what you find is you'll have people that say, well, yeah, I used an agent, I don't want to name names, but it deleted all my files because they didn't understand that they should be using version control. With database DevOps, one of the things that we talk about is we often talk about Dieter. Dieter is the DBA. And Dieter, isn't a fan of letting automation make changes to the production database. Because Dieter cares for the database. He loves it. He protects it. Because if someone does a drop table and he doesn't have a current backup, that's going to cause intense pain and suffering to the organization, right? And so what happens is, hey, it's one thing if on my workstation in a version-controlled repo that I let an agent kind of do some stuff and it deletes my files. Okay, fine. I may have lost a little time, but nothing critical happened. On the other stream, I'm going to install some agent and I'm going to give it, production access, and I'm going to let it do these things. You better have really defined the guardrails, really focused on it. And the only way you can do this is because you have to have done it before. You've had to try it, right? None of us sat down and said, oh, I'm going to do an automated CI/CD pipeline. I'm just going to update production without testing first in some kind of staging environment. Because if you do, you're crazy, because you're going to cost the business money, time, and you could really cause some pain to people. And so I think that's the critical aspect, is this word test that often developers see as a four-letter word, right? And that actually has to be in your mindset. That's our job as the humans, to guide the AI to validate, to look at what it's doing. And so, how can you do that? Well, you can't do that if you don't have any experience. You can't do that if you haven't had any training. In other words, people worry that I'm not going to have a job. You're going to have to, because no one's going to trust the agent to just go, yo, I'm not going to let some AI operate on me. You're crazy, right? I'm going to, want some stuff. Now, maybe I'll be dead and gone and this will change the world, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime where I just let these things loose. So I think agents are junior developers. They are junior engineers that are going to do a lot of stuff. They're very good at repetitive tasks, but they're only good at if the task is well defined and if the environment can make sure that they don't break loose, right? No drop table commands. Thank you very much.
I mean, that's so true. Like even with my own personal projects, I'm finding that now that agents and agentic AI is more prevalent, and I'm assigning tasks to it, I need to have better test suites basically defined, because it might be changing a feature, adding a feature, and that feature might work great, but it didn't know about this other logic that I needed to care about, and it changed that, and the whole application broke. So yes, having better just basic testing, getting better, and I mean it's a good DevOps practice to begin with. But we see all the time where enterprises, oh yeah, we have a few tests or whatever, we have a testing team. So again, those automated tests, those are critical, as well as those automated security tests. AI is, it's one of the things we're working at GitHub, is the AI that we generate for you. We are trying to add better security controls in the first place, but still, you want to have good scans into your, good automated scans and good timely scans into your processes. We're going to pull requests, be alerted if you're adding a new security vulnerability, or if new security vulnerability it comes about, how can you fix it as fast as possible? And again, more code's being written with AI we're seeing now. So that means, again, security is just more and more important. And of course, you see all of the different attacks and vulnerabilities, and basically, that leads to just millions and millions of dollars of business lost productivity and lawsuits and everything. So just security is just entirely critical with in today, especially with AI, more with the robots, changing the code and more code being created is just very critical.
Yeah, so from an infra perspective, as your policies for the win, right? That will block you from adding your app service to the internet or adding your database to the internet with a public IP. So provide guardrails that way, so you can even deploy your infrastructure safely, because it will just block whatever you're trying to do that is not within the policies.
But you just said something great there. Oh, well, you just use this, right? If we were to, query 100 developers who say they use Azure here, how many of them know that, right? And that's the critical aspect, right? The knowledge of the humans, everything is changing so fast. We are a critical aspect of this. I think people have, rightly so, some freakouts because unfortunately some of the uneducated C-level and C-suite folks, they get bought up and they go, oh, well, if we have this AI, then we don't need these 10 people, right? Well, who's going to tell the AI that, oh, did someone enable Azure policy so I can't break it, right? We still need these things. We need to follow these best practices. And that's a great one. That's a great example of, that's what a platform engineering engineer or team member knows, is they really understand the platform deeply and how to set up the processes and the automation to where it can't, break loose. Right? So I thought that was a great little, if you didn't catch that, there's this subtle thing, just, oh, well, you use Azure policy. Yeah, but that's such a thing that for some people is foreign, right? Because, oh, they YOLO, they have a subscription, they get free, they have their own subscription, they're a global administrator, and so they can do anything. They don't operate in that. That was great.
So this might be a stretch, but if we talk about these guardrails for the Azure platform, the testing for the code and the actual logic that we deploy on top of the platform, so can we go Inception style and say, okay, can we have guardrails for the DevOps practices themselves, so that we use DevOps to do all this, but also have some guardrails to make sure that we apply DevOps in the right way and don't do that in a wrong way? Any ideas?
Well, part of that, I think, comes to this notion, you hear the common term templates, right? And we have our blueprints, right? There's these ideas that we codify structure and setup. So for example, let's start with something that every developer should know, that's version control, right? And we'll stick with Git, but you're gonna create a repo. Well, on GitHub, if you create a repo, right, you can create it and there's the basic structure. But then the minute you want to invite someone, you got to think about, well, how are they going to have access to this, right? And so what you do is, whether it's through some tool that's built into the platform, which is configure this way, or you've learned a best practice, which is, when we create a repo, these are all the other automation things that happen automatically. We turn on these security features. For example, you can't commit to main. You have to use pull requests, right? I think that's one of the things that you can definitely codify. And this is where AI can help you. Because sometimes you know the concept, you know what you're trying to do, but you don't want to sit and do it to 50 repos by hand. So the thing we've been saying for years for DevOps is automate all things. So what you would do is you sit down and write a bash script, or you sit down and write a PowerShell script, or whatever. This is where AI can really help you, because you can now take stuff that's in your brain and codify that into scripts, put them in version control, and the agents can run them and set things up a certain way. And so if you can do this every stage of the setup, which is example, this is an environment. This environment has these tags, and therefore, you can only do these certain things. And then what you do is the agents that can be hooked into there, they don't run as super user, they don't run as sudo, they run in a security context just like you would have another human. And so I think that's a great way to do that, is take that notion of automation to the structure, the definition of how we operate, right? It's just like if anybody's had children, one of the things you'll learn if you've been living first as just adults in a place, you start looking how to baby-proof the house. So, a common joke in the U.S. is that you have electrical outlets. Now, in the U.S., our voltage is not as high-powered as some other places of the world. And so you'll just have power plugs that are really easy to stick forks into and toys into. Now, in the 70s, we said, well, that's okay. That hurt, didn't it? Don't do that again. But when my wife, for example, was like, no, we got to put the little plugs in there. We got to protect it. And so you learn based upon what you're doing that there are certain things you do that are best practices. And it's great that one person might do it, but that doesn't scale. So you've got to translate those best practices into some automation. And that's where AI can help you.
I mean, like, building the guardrails into your DevOps, I think is just like you said, it's almost like Inception, but it makes total sense, because with with AI, it can be a new attack vector. If there's some injection or the prompt injection that happens, or just something goes off the rails, like, you need to be able to guard against that. And especially if you're running automation, I'll take GitHub Actions, for example, your workflows. That's another possible attack vector. We've seen a few famous attacks this year recently, where a token had too much permissions and basically infected an action, and people were referring to that action, and just snowballed from there. So it's a matter, like kind of Brian mentioned, building out your workflows, your processes with the right permissions in place. Don't use a super user. Don't use a token that has write access to the repo, for example, to change things without you knowing about it. Because if a malicious actor gets in there, or again, some prompt injection happens, you don't want it to be able to change your tags, and you might not even know that, and just overwrite a tag, and all of a sudden you just release their shipped code to your customer that you weren't intending to. So building out those automation accounts and giving it the right level of access, and read access where it needs to, and only write access to the certain parts it needs to. Those are going to be critical in just thinking about the end-to-end with AI as well.
Well, what do you see, Arjan, in this regard as the biggest challenges that organizations have making this shift to all this new thinking that we've been talking about? Why doesn't everybody do it already? And so what do you see happen with in your projects and customer engagements?
Well, you would be surprised how many people don't know Git. Right? I think for us it's like common. I come to companies they say, you are using what? So how does that work? So sharing the knowledge and trying to tell people how that works and what are the best practices are and why there are guardrails, I think that's one of the most important things. Right? People need to understand why you put them there so they don't break it. Before you end up in like having all weird kinds of branching structures with 10 people needing to approve a pull request or whatever. And that also happens, right? Because people want to be in control. And so you can also be in control with a little less approvals and stuff. But you need to explain, and then explain it again.
So what you're saying is we all have an advocacy role to evangelize this way of working.
Yes, indeed, yes. Because otherwise it will not work. You will be there for a moment, right? You're a real consultant, so you will be there for, I don't know, half a year maybe, and then when you leave, they will just say, yeah, that guy, turn it back to what it was. Works much better.
So what would you tell this C-suite person that is less educated, as Brian said? What would you give as a message to make sure that we've got coverage? The teams are more technical oriented, but management needs to understand as well. What message would you give them to make sure that it's covered from the top to the bottom of an organization?
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain that is to just, I think mostly I draw it on a whiteboard, right? I think a nice example is private networking. So you have a front end and a back end and a database or something like that, and you say, oh, this is accessible to the internet, this is also accessible to the internet, this is also accessible to the internet. And then they are like, yeah, we don't want that. No, exactly. So that's why you need private networking. That is the easiest way to explain. The way we explain hub and spoke models is by using an airport. Right? You can't transfer from one airplane to the other with going through the boards and the gates and all that kind of stuff. That's how a networking works in Azure. And that is like a simple concept, but everybody understands that you cannot walk from one plane to the other. And that's like, so it's making it easy to understand and for non-technical people, which is hard, by the way.
Okay, but can you extend this analogy to bringing DevOps to an organization? And DevOps, as we like to say, it's more of a mindset than how do you get that in place?
Yeah, so usually it's like the small steps to move forward, right? They all know if you do a big bang release, it will fail. Because everybody had that experience. So making small steps, saying this is the change you made. If it now breaks, this is the change. Right? You can easily go back. And then providing the testing is also like, yeah, we need more testing because we all had incidents. And we can cover that with maybe a unit test, more or less. That is not hard for people to understand because they all had an experience like it breaks, it went down, it was not up to quality, we had to fix things, features were not up to par, all that kind of stuff. And then making that into like, all right, then you need to do small things instead of doing 6 months of development and then releasing it in a big bang.
All right, so that's more of the agile segue into it, making sure you small increments and then you can cycle and go fast. Josh, what are some epiphanies or aha moments that you had yourself or saw others have in this regard?
I mean, like you kind of mentioned it, like everyone should be familiar with Git, but a lot of people aren't. So even with those familiar with Git, you could have the best tools in the world and the best AI in the world, the best pipelines in the world, let's say, if we're breaking it down to utilities, but your branching structure really is a manifestation of your business processes and just how the processes that your team has to follow. So if we're seeing that teams still have legacy repos, large teams with kind of maybe not as efficient branching strategies, like a Git flow branching strategy, for example, where it's long-lived branch production. Those are still going to be you're not going to be able to move fast in that. You're going to have those issues on big change. Those typically lead to a big deployment types of company or release cycles where it's going to be hard to roll that back. What if something broke? How do you know what broke? How do you roll it back? We are seeing more companies kind of get the picture that hey, we need to kind of modernize. One, we have to be better about bringing Git and Git training to our developers, especially if they're migrating from a different version control. We are seeing a lot of that as well recently. But also just we need to really modernize our entire application here, and that starts with the foundations where you are in version control, Git, for example.
And Brian, you must have plenty of horror stories here, or maybe the success stories. So one of each.
I definitely have a bit of both. I have one customer I'm working with for a long time, and it's really hard. It's the joke is building the airplane as you're flying. Organizations can strongly desire to change how they do things, but they got to keep paying the bills, right? They've got to do stuff. So you can't just come in and say, well, we're going to turn your process upside down where no one can get anything done. One of the mistakes people make, though, is that they forget that this is a hard job that requires education. We often don't give people the time to learn. We just expect them. You talk about, not everybody knows Git. How many people took Git training, or it was just you're smart, it's easy, you should just be able to pick it up? And you find over and over again, the reason there's websites like, Git Hurts and, I can say it right, I'm in the Netherlands. Yeah. Oh shit, Git, is because we're not trained. And so I think a fundamental problem is this throwing training out. It's always one of the things that gets cut out of budgets. People don't get to go to conferences. I mean, the folks that are here with us live, as well as the people that are in sessions, they're totally blessed that their companies are willing to invest in them to come and learn from experts on how to do things better, right? So I think we have to make sure people are being trained on the fundamentals of how to do things. Then it's okay, find what your pain points are, right? Decide that we're not going to have ship products with vulnerabilities because we use third-party libraries, as an example, right? You can't solve everything, but you have to pick some of the low-hanging fruit. Version control, all things. Make sure that we're doing some kind of secret scanning. Make sure we're doing certain things, and continuously looking to improve and share that knowledge, right? This notion of doing brown bag lunches where you share, you talk about, this is something I learned, right? That's probably the biggest thing, is when you're not committed to improving your team and how they do things, you're not going to improve how you build a product that you then deliver and get done. So I think that's one of the critical aspects is there's so much going on that if you don't give them training, they're not going to be successful.
Can I add one more thing? Because that takes a lot of time. Right? I spent 2 years trying to teach people how to do Git, do deployments, do automation, and then all of a sudden they got it, and they were really enthusiastic about it. But it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes a lot of pushing and dragging. So it's also not that easy just to say, yeah, we're going to do a Git session and you will be fine. That's not how it works.
All right, so maybe looking into the future a little bit, what is the next big thing you see coming or wish would be coming? Josh.
I mean, I think it's all about the agent era, right? I think I mentioned it before. Just the age of eras. The age of agents, I should say. and just really the policies around there. So we talked a little bit about that before, but just the better guardrails for your agents, building your workflows, building those settings inside of GitHub where you define a firewall for when your agents run so they can't access maybe malicious websites, your MCP registries and allow lists, those types of things. Basically, we have a lot of the features, the agents and MCPs and everything available for developers. Now, we want to see the organization administrators, building some of those, like having better lenses and just overall control of what developers are using. Because hey, we ship out MCPs, great. One of the first questions we got at GitHub was, how do we prevent people from running just any MCP server they find on the internet? So just building those guardrails out and giving administrators really the lens to like what developers could use inside the company.
So I'm hoping for applications that use AI to solve like difficult problems, right? So medical stuff like scanning the pictures, finding out if there is a disease, you have a disease, whatever. I think that will be the next great step to do that, and it's going to be all MCP servers and agents, of course, and then in a safe way. I think that would be my hope for the next few years, that is coming, instead of just a chatbot that's accessing your files, which is also nice, but...
So I think pulling back from a generic standpoint, if we look at where we're going with agents and stuff, we're basically taking away one of the areas that most companies invest in, which is just developers writing code. Well, now that we're going to have agents writing code, where we have to see innovation, I think we're going to see a return to quality testing. We're going to see innovation in how do we test these applications that have been built by AI? How do we do the validation? And then again, security. Security is going to be much more important as we look at, for example, everything from the attack vectors via prompts to just even making sure that the AI built it with the correct security practices, right? Because unfortunately, it's garbage in, garbage out. If we look at the internet as this one big thing, and in the middle is, neutral. Over here is rainbows, puppies, unicorns. And over here is, all the Halloween movies, scary stuff, right? And you have to make sure that we hopefully lean more towards the puppies and rainbows and not towards this. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, if you're trying to operate at the speed of AI, you're going to need tools, processes, and technology that loops us in, because we talked about, I think you said we need 17 approvers now before we can actually approve this pull request. Right? We're going to have to find a way to know what was created is good. What is our source of truth? And I think that's the next big horizon on how do we do that? How do we build trust between the humans and the machines, right? Because I know I've had so many instances where, it looks like it did a great job. It thinks it did a great job. And then you go look what it did, and go, nope, not even close, right? So.
I guess, and just like one more thing to that as well, like just I guess selfishly, agents are now like good enough, I think, to actually like help teams, when they're doing like large scale migrations. We've seen some really cool success stories in the last year, and I can imagine it's only going to get better and better of a company moving from product A to product B, or let's just say Jenkins to GitHub Actions, and before that would be a multi-year process to do. Now with the agents and being able to better again define how the agent works, being able to define with the spec kit of like, okay, if you're converting this type of Jenkins workflow, make sure you build it in this way, use our templates. Really it's going to unlock customers to be able to do just switch your pipeline system. It's easy, but it's really Jenkins and GitHub Actions are very, very different in nature. So agents are going to allow and make those types of migrations much simpler for customers. It's still going to take some oversight. We need to be able to monitor, control, practice, build out the quality gates where needed. But it is going to make some of those types of migrations just much faster in nature. So that's going to be really cool for what I do from a day-to-day basis. Hey, let's tap into AI more to help with these types of migrations.
All right, so we're getting close to the end of the hour. any topics that you want to bring to the table? Maybe some opinions or ideas that you have, or encouragements. Maybe what's there from your side?
Well, one more thing then. I think we talk about DevOps, right? We talk about all kinds of things, but I think, and tooling is an important part, but it's not the goal. Right? I think if you pick a tool, it doesn't really matter if it's GitHub or Azure DevOps or GitLab or whatever tool you want to use. The concepts still apply. They are still the same. And I think that's also important. Right? We hear a lot of companies say, yeah, we need to move to Azure DevOps. All right, so is that a goal in itself, or does it solve any problems? Probably not. And implementing just a tool doesn't cut it. It's the same with Copilot. Yes, we all need it. It's really cool, but if you don't use it in the right way, it doesn't add much value. So I think that's the thing I want to add.
Josh? No, I've got a wrap up.
Oh, you got to wrap up. All right. I mean, it's a good point. So you can't just let's all move to GitHub. We're gonna have DevOps check. So it's just a matter of being cognizant of the bigger picture. I guess I'm looking forward to this year on kind of building out using AI kind of in more in the actions and security space. So we do a lot of actions and GitHub actions and workflows and just pipeline creation with our customers. So really being able to kind of use AI to kind of tap into that and kind of build into the process and kind of see how that goes. So it could be great or it could be horrible depending on what guardrails are built or not built into the workflow. So, but I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to be willing to learn, right? Never stop learning. One of the things, and Josh, can you do me a favor to hold the mic? If we go to the back of the book, we finished on, kind of what's next. And, embrace learning that comes with the journey. Embrace Kaizen, the Japanese word for improvement, right? The idea is that you want to be focused on improving it. Today we look at AI as a way to improve. Who knows what's going to be in 5, 10 years? But the critical aspect is nothing that is, everything has changed over my life and my career, except for the fact that I've always had to keep learning. I've had to be willing to observe, test, right? Apply the scientific method to what I do. And when I find something that works, do it. But then always be willing to listen, right? Josh and I have a few years difference between us. And Josh is one of the kindest, smartest people I know. And so if he says something, go, oh, I hadn't thought about that way. Right? So don't let your experience be an impediment to your willingness to learn something new. Always be willing to embrace. Understand that you may know a good way to do something, but sometimes there's a shortcut, and that shortcut can be safe or it may not. Apply critical thinking, embrace change, and embrace that willingness to learn. But don't just do stuff because the cool kids do it. Ask critical questions, try it, and then go forward.
All right, so that aligns pretty well with the DevOps idea, mindset of continuous improvement. And yes. Yeah, all right. So final things we want to mention before we wrap up. Arjan?
One thing to add then is also allow for failure, right? Embrace failure, because it will happen, and you can only learn from it. So don't punish people if they make a mistake, but learn from it. And then improve. That's
So latch on to the learning mindset. It's okay to learn and grow, but you can also only do so by allowing mistakes. And all right.
Yeah, things are changing so fast. No one can be perfect, like you mentioned. You need that slack time to be able to learn, to be able to grow, try things out. It's okay to fail. Really, it should be about that. In a good organization, they're going to give you that space to be able to learn, experiment, and if it doesn't work, go back, right? So that's what I hope we kind of get to more as an industry of just, hey, if things are moving fast, no one can be an expert. We need to be able to have a trusting environment here. So
yeah, no, absolutely. Fail fast, fail safe, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Right, mistakes will be made. We're humans, we're involved, and AI will make mistakes. And so the fundamental aspect of this continuous learning process is to not place blame, but to look at where we can improve, right? And when something bad does happen, right, this notion of root cause analysis is a fallacy, right? Because, so we fixed the root cause, well, something else is going to break. What you have to do is be prepared for the fact that things could happen. How do we mitigate and reduce the failure damage area? And then how can we continue to improve our process, right? You don't just, buy one lock and assume that that's going to take care of all the things, because then you forget that they were building on a new door over here and you didn't buy locks for it, right? Again, I go back to this, focusing on ultimately that trust, because AI is a data problem at its root. And so you have to have trust around that. That means making sure that garbage doesn't come in so you don't get garbage out.
All right. So with that, I want to thank you, all three of you, for all your insights, your ideas, your opinions. The book again, essentialdevops.com?
No, .org.
.org.
Essentialdevops.org. Like I said, the book there is physical copies, but we're going to make it available for free online. And so we've got some stuff coming, so check it out, essentialdevops.org. And again, it's not a product book. I'm not selling you anything. We're just trying to tell you the great ways that you can embrace DevOps, and how you can basically build solutions better. So yes.
All right, so with that, that's what you can take. Thanks everyone here for attending. Thanks people watching live, or maybe afterwards. Thanks for joining in. And have a great conference and more Techorama TV.
Thanks everybody, be good humans.
Bye.